Hello and welcome to the Roots Up podcast. This is Riley Mletsky. Today I'm joined by Johhny, Freedom, and Kaiser Stalling. It's going to be a jam-packed episode today. We have interviews from Scott Taylor, the owner and general manager of FC Arizona. They're building a new 10,900-seat soccer-specific stadium. Make sure you listen all the way through for that interview. And Coach Rudland of AFC Ann Arbor as they prepare for their NPSL Great Lakes season and also their US Open Cup match against Lansing Ignite in USL League One. There's going to be a lot of stadium news we're going to talk about in today's episode. We're going to start off with Bugeaters FC as they're moving from Lincoln to Omaha to a soccer-specific collegiate stadium at Creighton University. Then we're going to move on over to the Sunshine Conference where Miami United FC, they kick off their NPSL Sunshine Conference campaign against rival Miami FC at Miami FC, but 12 days before their home opener, which is next weekend, they announced that they'll be playing at a new stadium. We're going to talk about that decision to flip venues very last minute. After that, we'll discuss Asheville City SC's parking problem and why a minor league baseball team is parking on their field. In our last bit of stadium news, FC Arizona. They announced a 10,900-seat soccer-specific stadium, as I mentioned earlier, and a facility to go along with that. We're going to talk to Scott about that and then discuss what we think about the announcements. After the interview with Scott, we're going to talk about some US Open Cup action. We're going to preview the round 1 and then talk about the potential round 2 pairings that are announced recently. And we'll give our US Open Cup over-under predictions, a fun game we've been playing on Twitter. It's going to boil over into the podcast. And then Tulsa announced that they will have a youth academy, and they're creating a pathway for their youth players all the way up to the NPSL first team through a UPSL U17 team. And we're going to talk about the pathway they're creating in the Heartland Conference. And finally, we'll wrap that all up with some Oakland Roots conversation as they have a very unique partnership with Oaklandish, a very trendy West Coast fashion brand. And an NBA All-Star was actually wearing their jersey and got some attention on national ESPN coverage of the NBA playoffs. But first of all, we're going to discuss the Bugeaters FC move from Lincoln, Nebraska to Omaha, Nebraska. And Jonathan Calora, the owner of Nebraska Bugeaters FC, has kind of created a spectacle on Twitter. They're similar to Minneapolis City or one of the other big Twitter teams. Stockade FC is another example of that, where Bugeaters FC is putting out some awesome logos. They're very interactive on Twitter and other social medias. They have very cool jerseys, and they've created a following around the country. Last year they played in the UPSL, and people thought they were going to actually go to the NPSL. That ended up not happening, and now they're joining the new Great Plains Premier League, which is an offspring of the Gulf Coast Premier League. And Nebraska Bugeaters are playing some big friendlies. Next weekend they're playing in Chattanooga. They're also going to make trips to Little Rock. Next weekend is Little Rock, and then they'll go to Chattanooga later in the season. But Bugeaters announced that they'll be playing in Omaha after their inaugural season was actually in Lincoln. They created a big community in Lincoln, averaging about 800 to 1,000 fans a game, and now they're heading on over to Omaha to play in Creighton's beautiful soccer-specific stadium that seats 6,000 people. It's about a 50-minute drive from Lincoln to Omaha, so it'll be interesting to see if their fan base will travel. I think it creates new opportunity to interact with the new markets and also bring some of the old market from Lincoln to their new soccer-specific stadium. So I think it's going to work out in the end. The Bugeaters are a strong brand, and I think they can draw good numbers moving over.
Well, I think it's an interesting concept. I used to live in Nebraska. I was in North Platte, Nebraska for a couple years with my family, actually before I moved back to Wichita. And it's interesting. Lincoln's an interesting soccer town. I don't think Nebraska's kind of like Michigan. You know, there's a lot of good soccer in Nebraska. Concordia College is there. I believe they were the NAIA champions a while back. So there's some good soccer there. The American Outlaws, the supporters group for the U.S. national team, based in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where they started. A bunch of rowdy fans, U.S. national team fans, started the American Outlaws. So there's a lot of history and tradition in Lincoln. So I understand. Plus, it's a college town. That's where UNL is. Memorial Stadium for football. Lincoln becomes, I think, the largest city in Nebraska every football game. So, it's an interesting city. I think it was a great city for the Bugeaters to be at. But I understand and recognize the opportunity to come to move to Creighton. I mean, as you mentioned before, the stadium is absolutely gorgeous. They're a fantastic Division I program. I understand the desire to move to a soccer-specific stadium in Omaha. They have a lot of fans, and let's be honest, it really isn't that far of a drive.
And moving over to Miami United FC and the NPSL Sunshine Conference, Miami United FC decided 12 days before the club's home kickoff that they would move from Ted Hendricks Stadium at Midlander Park, and they'd move to North Miami Athletic Stadium. And their new venue, North Miami Athletic Stadium, has aluminum bleachers that seat a capacity of 4,241 people. And artificial turf was installed last year. The reason they actually left Ted Hendricks was because they didn't have adequate locker rooms for the visitors, so they wanted to have a good space for the visitors to locker room and look more professional and comply to the NPSL rules about locker rooms. So, I mean, obviously a smart move. You always want to have locker rooms for the visitors. That's kind of a no-brainer. And it's a good-sized stadium. It has a nice playing surface, so a solid move for Miami United. Miami United FC actually kicked off their NPSL campaign with a 2-0 loss to Miami FC, their crosstown rival. Of course, Miami FC used to play in the NASL, and they're an absolute powerhouse in the NPSL. Miami FC hosted the match, and they had a fantastic crowd, great atmosphere, a good way to kick off the NPSL Sunshine Conference season. Boca Raton actually left the league this year. They're on hiatus for a year. They're playing the UPSL, and fun story, Chad Ochocinco plays on their UPSL squad, former NFL wide receiver. But Sunshine Conference is the only match this weekend. Magic City Classica is what they call it. Cool culture and environment there. It was fun to watch if you're watching along on the stream, and a good game. Miami FC just looks dominant this year, and they don't even have all their players in yet, so going to be quite a season in the Sunshine Conference, that's for sure. And then moving into even more stadium news, as this is the week of stadium news in the NPSL right before the season starts. Asheville City SC and the NPSL Southeastern Conference announced a statement on Twitter where they're basically saying, hey, the minor league baseball team, Asheville Taurus, they have a stadium right below us. That's cool, both owned by the city, but there's not enough parking for either of us, and that's been a problem for both teams continuously year after year. And now the baseball team is parking on the soccer field. And there's pictures by supporters at one of the goal ends that the artificial turf is being ripped up. And at the moment, it's not that big of a deal. They can fix it, and it's not really going to affect play, but it's already a really crappy surface to play on. And later and deep into the summer, when minor league baseball is in full swing and we're in deep soccer season, the turf's going to be in bad shape. Now, I will say that right now, it's only team players and team personnel and buses and stuff like that are parking over there. It's not other fans that are parking on the field. That's a little bit better, but still, very strange situation in Asheville where the parking wars continue.
It's weird. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, parking is an issue that we're having in Wichita. I don't know how it is for you, Ryan, but it's like all over Europe, people walk everywhere. I mean, what's the problem walking a quarter mile to a soccer stadium or walking a quarter of a mile to a baseball stadium? What would possess these players to fucking park their vehicles on a field? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I'd be pissed. And how are they getting around training? I imagine the soccer team's training. How are they getting around these vehicles for training?
Okay, so, I mean, the soccer team doesn't report until about May 5th anyway, so they're not training on the field. And the minor league baseball team, they have the stadium blocked off, so they're the only people that can use it when they're playing a home series. They have first dibs. So they're not going to be there at the same time as training or an event for Asheville City. and there's about 200 parking spaces for the baseball stadium that can hold a few thousand people. So it's kind of like there's already not even close to enough parking for the baseball stadium, and that's been a big problem. But yeah, parking downtown's tough too in Asheville. There's not really a clear-cut solution, but there really needs to be better public transportation to the baseball stadiums. Is the only reasonable solution from this, because the neighborhoods surrounding the ballpark in Memorial Stadium where Asheville City SC plays their matches are getting lots of people parking in the neighborhoods illegally, then walking over. So the city officials have a big task on their hands sorting this thing out. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a tough solution for both sides.
Maybe the club, maybe the soccer club could create a pregame party, like a block party at some location that could hold all the fans, and then get everybody nice and liquored up, partied up, and then lease, whatever, some buses, and bus all the fans over to the pitch. When the game's over, bus them back and have a post party with the players. Problem solved. You're welcome. No charge from Johhny Freedom right there.
Well, I think Asheville City Soccer Club parking, they'll need to open up the baseball field and allow fans to park on the field.
Touche.
At the baseball stadium. I mean, if that's how it works, if that's how it works for one sporting event, is we're going to open up the other stadium's field of play for parking. Which, by the way, I mean, I know we're all kind of against this, but how backward is that? Like, I'm trying to think, like, how many decades back do I need to think where most metropolitan areas would think that was the solution? Like, we're just going to open up and allow you to park on the pitch. I mean, there's a lot of high schools around this country that would never allow anyone to park on their pitch.
New Friends University's put $100,000 AstroTurf down for football on their soccer team. You think somebody's gonna? They were about to kick my ass for when I was walking on it, when it was still sewing the letter or the numbers on it. I mean, it's absurd. I agree, Ryan. Stupid.
Well, it's willful destruction of their own property. So unfortunately, it's a lack of respect for the soccer club. But two, it's a lack of respect for their own assets.
Yeah, and Johhny, I think that's a great solution. I've been told the one problem with that is Asheville is a pub city. It's known around the Southeast for people vacation there to try all the different pubs and bars. There's a bunch of breweries all around the city, and everyone has their favorite brew in the city, whether it's Highwire, which is the club sponsor, or one of the other major breweries in the city. Everyone has their favorite, and they're kind of snobbish about that. So everyone tailgates at their own bar, and they don't necessarily go to the same one. So trying to get everyone at one specific bar is very tough. That's what I've been told. So I think that's probably the most reasonable solution for the soccer club from their parking standpoint. But I've been told it's kind of an uphill battle because of some of the beer snobbery.
Well, I would say as a fan, I mean, we're constant. I mean, let's talk about grassroots soccer through America. These teams don't survive without sponsorship. As supporters, you should be supporting the businesses that support your club. I mean, to me, that's a simple solution. If a specific brewery was sponsoring FC Wichita, I'd be pounding down their beers every Saturday or Thursday or wherever it was, because I'm going to support businesses that support my club. So in this specific situation, while they're bantering and working through this parking situation, maybe they can rally around this brewery that's already sponsoring their club. I mean, if that's the case. I mean, that's my solution. That would be my solution. Would be, let's rally around the businesses that are supporting our club. Let's get through this tough time as we're dealing with this parking situation. Help the club out, help the sponsors out. And maybe that would encourage some of the other breweries to step up, and maybe they could have multiple breweries supporting the club.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about grassroots support, you got to go back and support people that are supporting you. If I'm scratching your back, you got to scratch my back, kind of thing. So I definitely agree to that, and I think that's plausible right there. And moving into our last tidbit of stadium news, and this is probably the biggest of the bunch. FC Arizona, one of the NPSL Founder Cup teams and one of the future NPSL Pro teams, FC Arizona, they announced a 10,900 seat soccer specific stadium in Arizona. And also, the cool thing about this is no taxpayer dollars will be used to build this massive stadium. And the stadium is going to also have 4 practice pitches to hold an academy, an indoor facility with 5-on-5, and a weight room, classrooms, a hotel, and business centers. So we also had an interview with Scott Taylor, the owner and GM of FC Arizona. We're going to play in a little bit where I went one-on-one with him. But before that, guys, what was your initial reaction to the stadium announcement?
Well, I think anytime anybody's getting a soccer-specific stadium, especially at the level of NPSL, I think that's amazing news. I think it's fantastic. I wish them all the best. I think it's wonderful. I'm sure they're pumped. Their supporters are probably super excited. The whole organization's got to be excited. We got a $22 million upgrade here in Wichita, and we're going nuts over it. It's great. It's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think looking at the renderings from what FC Arizona announced with or put forth with their announcement today, it looks like a smart plan. You know, you hear 10,900 and you look at what they've averaged in fans, and you're like, well, that's overly ambitious, but maybe it's a situation where if you build it, you know, people will come. They're living kind of in the shadow of Phoenix Rising and some other clubs in the immediate area, and maybe they get a bit lost in the wash there. But, you know, you build a stadium like that and a facility like that, people realize that you take this pro version of the NPSL seriously as a club, and that you're building for it long term, and not just spouting off and shouting into the wind, so to speak, that you're a pro club and you have little to show for it or back that up as far as infrastructure. So, you know, local media will take notice for one, but also fans will take notice that, oh, you know, we do have another pro option in the city. And then you look at the stadium rendering itself, the fields there that you have, the availability for youth academy, the availability to open up for open play, for the community to come in and, you know, use the fields and be able to charge fees for people to use that as a source of income to the club, back to the club. And then you look at the stadium itself and the design. You know, I love the idea of having that 3-sided stadium design with the open end that also lends itself to, you know, should it be demanded for, or the demand grow for it, that they can, you know, build and continue to build up and build out and close in that open end and continue to expand really on all 4 sides as needed, so that as the attendance and fan following grows, the stadium can grow with it. So I think it's a really smart design. Wish them all the best. And like Johhny said, you know, I think it's something we can all aspire to. And as fans of lower league soccer, particularly independent lower league soccer, you know, you really root for one another outside of when you're playing one another on the pitch. You really root for one another to do well, because, you know, one club doing well in your conference or in your league is good for everyone else.
Well, the facility's got 4 full-size fields. I mean, it's got classrooms. It's got an indoor soccer facility. So it's more than just a stadium. It's like a complex. In essence, they could host a league there. They could host regional tournaments. There's a lot of things that they could do there. To grow the game, to give back to the community. And people are excited about the youth program in America. You know, they're tired of hearing this pay-to-play shit all the time. And so this gives these clubs, especially an NPSL club that's, you know, looking to go pro, an opportunity to connect with the community, put their money where their mouth is, which is in youth soccer. I think it's fantastic. And if you look at the renderings, like what Ryan was saying, it looks like a lot of the English clubs, like some of the smaller English clubs. The renderings look sweet. It looks cool, man. I dig it. I'm happy for them.
Yeah, and the project by FC Arizona and the stadium, putting this much money into it, I think it really legitimizes NPSL Pro when it says, hey, this is a legit professional league and you need to pay attention to it. So I think it benefits the other teams that are looking to go NPSL Pro as well, and not just FC Arizona. Really looking forward to seeing where this goes and the stadium opening, too. I'm looking forward to the groundbreaking process and watching this and following it through. And to talk more about the stadium news of FC Arizona, we'd like to welcome in the owner and general manager of FC Arizona, Scott Taylor. And Scott, you guys just announced a big announcement, a 10,900-seat soccer-specific stadium with 4 practice fields, indoor practice facility, classrooms, and attached to it will be a business center and a hotel. A very, very big announcement for an NPSL side, an NPSL Pro side. kind of setting the foundation for a strong future and a vision. And this has kind of culminated to this, the 2-year existence of FC Arizona and the NPSL. So what did it take building up to this, and how did we get to this moment where we're announcing a 10,000-seat soccer-specific stadium?
I've been working on it for about a year. It's just been frustrating to be renting places where we can't sell alcohol and beer. So for me, that was the biggest impetus. And I think the fan base as a whole and sponsors and the soccer community as a whole, unless you have more of a permanent home, then sometimes you aren't taken as seriously. So that's not to say that, you can't do what Chattanooga has done and rent a stadium and still have a huge following. But for us, our fan base really wanted to see, a permanent home. And so you can see from the excitement in the social media and when we announced it yesterday that a lot of people were buzzing over it. So we're excited. I've been working with a developer in the Southeast Valley of Phoenix and Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert area, and off the 202 freeway. And there's 3 different parcels that we're negotiating on now. So it's exciting. Yeah. The footprint of the soccer side of the development is about 15 acres, and it will share a parking lot with the Class A office space and the hotel and the retail. So just trying to create synergy between the two. One would be a heavy day use and one would be a heavy night use. And then we would have a European style academy. We're working on doing a partnership, not just a loose affiliation, but a partnership with a team in England, a very big team, one of the biggest teams in England, in the Premier League. And so all of these things are good, and we're really excited about the future. And this is a major step forward for us, and I'm 100% certain that we're going to be able to get it done. So.
And how was FC Arizona able to take on this monumental task of building a soccer-specific stadium without any taxpayer dollars?
Well, we found 20 acres for $3 million, basically, and then I have a developer that's interested in the project. I've done a pro forma on the building of the stadium and the fields and the land costs. And the whole project will cost about $15 million with the land. But keep in mind that this part of Arizona has money, and we have over 25,000 kids that play youth soccer and within 15 miles of where we're going to build this. And then this part of town really is hungry for a sports and entertainment venue because those are all in what we call the West Valley and Phoenix. So putting something in this area, it will be the primary tenant, but I know I've already talked to half a dozen other entities that would love to rent this out, one of which is a huge concert promoter here. And so we think we can get another 25 dates in addition to our home games. So when you start to do that, and then you have an academy, a youth academy, where parents want their kids in a youth academy where their kids are either going to go pro or go get a Division I college scholarship. They'll pay to be at a nice facility like this. So it's the nice thing is it's in town. It's not. It's not out in the middle of nowhere, so it's going to be exciting. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is all of those uses, when you do the annual revenue on all those uses, it pencils out to where the developer will make their money back in about 6 years, and from there, we'll be a good tenant, in the long term. So it's private land. and it's in this area, a lot of people have to do land developments these days on reservation land, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. But for us, we just wanted to own it, not lease it, and partner with this developer on this, and the numbers made sense for him, so we're moving forward. Yeah.
And we're talking to Scott Taylor, the owner and general manager of FC Arizona and the NPSL Founders Cup, about his exciting new project with the Soccer Pacific Stadium and Academy in the Arizona area. And
the other major source of revenue that I didn't mention is the stadium naming rights. And so when you sign a 10-year deal on that, we think we can get $500,000 for 10 years. That's $5 million right there. So that, coupled with us using it for our professional games, now being able to sell beer, having the youth academy, all those things coupled together, it really starts to pencil out. Where it becomes difficult in other markets is if the land costs are too much. Like for example, in the Cosmos case, it's tough, because they live in a market that's very hard to get land at this kind of price. Same with California. And so I feel for those guys. They do the best they can, and they try to find venues that make sense. And it's not always easy in those markets to do something like this, but in our market, it makes perfect sense. So.
And so a kind of unique and cool thing about this project that you're building is, number one, the fact that it is soccer specific first, and you have that you're not playing on a football field and then a soccer team's playing on it, but you're building your own stadium. So that's neat. But the stands itself are very steep, so it makes for very tight lines. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then the second part of the question is, you have classrooms and an indoor pitch, and how those play into the facility and the growth of the sport there.
Well, we did it steep for a reason, because I think, and let me just say congratulations to Tottenham for this past week, opening their stadium. For me, that's an inspiration. And you can see when a club is able to open a new venue, how it captures the imagination of the whole community around it, and they really want to go and check it out and call it their home. I think every club that is able to work out a deal like this, I think they should try to. But like I said, it's tough in some markets, but we did it really steep. I've been to games at Avaya where the earthquake, and I like I like that kind of sight line where you're kind of on top of the action, even if you're 30 rows up, you feel like you're right on top of it, and because it's that steep, I think it's going to be kind of cool to watch games there. It is a soccer specific stadium. We're looking at doing the surface and the grasso, the hybrid stuff. Obviously, we have to take into account the Arizona climate. We do have shade canopy over it, similar to what they do out here with playgrounds, where you can take it on and off. And so in June, July, and August, you can put it up, and then come September through May, you can just leave it open like that. And so that coupled with some massive chillers and some circulating fans with that shade canopy, you'll drop it, about 30 degrees is what our engineers are telling us. So that's what that is. If you look at the rendering, you can see kind of a shade canopy over it. It's kind of translucent, but it will provide shade. And but yeah, it is soccer specific, but we feel like we can, my son plays lacrosse, and we feel like we can have, exhibition lacrosse games there, invite in some big lacrosse teams, and invite in some, do some rugby things, whatever the demand is going to be, whoever wants to rent it. There's really no medium-sized stadium in the Phoenix metro area. So we feel like this is going to kind of fill that void. And like, for example, the city I live in is called Chandler. This state high school football championship was Chandler versus Perry, and they rented Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe. That stadium holds 60,000. And then they had about 15,000 show up. So it's kind of too big for a high school, but the crowd was too big for a high school, but the crowd was too small for a massive college stadium. We feel like this is kind of the in-between stadium. And based on, our market research, there's a lot of people who would want to rent this. So now you can see the business plan and how it's sustainable. It's not just us using it. It's a community asset that we feel like people will rent. And then with having the academy there, you also get a daytime use out of it as well. So it's exciting, In terms of the indoor facility, I remember the first time I went to London, I stayed in the Hilton right next to Wembley Stadium. And I remember looking down, and if you've been to Wembley Stadium, there's a bunch of five-a-side pitches right next to the stadium. And so we designed this to have 3 five-a-side pitches, and which will get a lot of use in the summer. And have a weight room in there and different state-of-the-art stuff for the academy. So it's going to be cool. That's what that is. Yeah.
And in the years leading up to the groundbreaking, and the stadium is just be a groundbreaking ceremony in 2021. So leading up to that, what will the atmosphere be like, and what will the team venue be looking like leading up to the groundbreaking of the new Soccer Pacific Stadium?
Well, we think we're going to get the land sometime later this year. The land will be closed actually sometime in the next 3 or 4 months. And so we could actually really start playing. We might be able to start playing on it for the new MPSL, league that we're working on the branding and naming right now of it. But, everybody calls it the Founders Cup. That's just a way for us to kind of have an exhibition cup as we lead into 2020, but could be ready by 2020 where we have a smaller, 3,000 or 4,000 seater, on the pitch, and a couple fields ready, or we might be able to do the whole thing. We'll see, but it's we feel like we're in the, we've got 2 parcels that we're zeroing in on. One's in one city and one's in another city. So we're going to those cities and saying, okay, who's gonna not necessarily give us incentives, but because we're not asking for that, but who's gonna be the easiest to work with on approval and zoning and those things. The nice thing is about both these parcels is there's not really neighborhoods around it, so I don't think we'll have a lot of resistance from neighbors. On the contrary, I think the whole East Valley, as we call it in Phoenix, I think is going to really be excited that something like this is coming, because it just doesn't exist right now. There's no venue for sports entertainment of like this, and you're talking about an area of 1.2 to 2 million, 1.5 to 2 million people. So it's a lot of people, and so there is an Osceola airport too that people don't know about in Phoenix. It's called Williams Gateway. So it's kind of in that area, but yeah, it's going to be fun. We're really excited, and it's fun to see the fans excited, that sort of energy. They deserve this. It's really the fans that deserve this, and really hope that they'll come out and support the team. So.
Well, it's been very exciting to see the plans unfold and to follow along from afar. Good luck in the upcoming season and the project coming up. Make sure you're following FC Arizona on Twitter at FC Arizona Soccer. And Scott, thank you so much for your time.
Riley, I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks.
You too. And now on to the U.S. Open Cup, as The second round potential pairings were announced. Ryan, which potential matchups jumped out to you?
Jumped out to me as far as intriguing. Obviously a lot's to be made of state rivalries or potential state rivalries that can be born in the Open Cup. The way that we're set up here with so many different leagues and being so disparate as a system here in the United States, a lot of times they don't play each other. So, teams that you get to see like potential state rivalries. I know we talked earlier off air, Greenville Triumph versus Charleston Battery is a great potential matchup. Last year we saw Charleston Battery and South Georgia Tormenta. That's another one that, not within state borders, but, born out of proximity. There's probably a lot of bad blood there that could grow into a real rivalry there, even though they're in different levels of the USL. Austin Bold getting to host one their first year against Tulsa Roughnecks would probably be a good game. Others that stood out is Laredo Heat, which I fully expect to just tear Brazos Valley apart against San Antonio. San Antonio has had some up and downs in the Open Cup the past few years. You would think they've learned some lessons from overlooking foes in the past, but even if they come into that game fully aware of their opponent and ready to play, I do think Laredo Heat is game to go toe-to-toe with them. Other ones that kind of really jumped out at me would be the really weird Central Region one where it seems like they've kind of thrown their rules of proximity completely out the window, and they have El Paso Locomotive hosting the winner of Bavarian SC and Forward Madison. So that's a winner from the Wisconsin Derby, quote-unquote, between Bavarian SC out of Milwaukee and Forward Madison out of course, Madison. Wisconsin would have to travel all the way to El Paso for that game against El Paso Locomotive, which just is absurd. When you go through all these stated rules from the Open Cup about how they're going to look at proximity, and then they've literally skipped much of the Central Region and USL teams just to circumvent really the heartland and all of Texas to force one of these Wisconsin teams to travel all the way to El Paso.
And dude, it's not like North Texas, man. It's like you're sending them down from the north to Mexico.
Right.
I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, you couldn't send them any farther away. It's ridiculous. So I'm sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. The only one
I'm fired up.
No, you're fine. One more I'd point out and let you guys kind of point out some ones you've seen as well. In the second round, a potential matchup would be if Orange County FC in the NPSL were to somehow defeat FC Golden State Force out of the USL League Two, which Golden State Force is just a really dominant team, and they field teams in League Two, in the UPSL, and NPSL. It's just a really strong top-to-bottom program. Anyway, if Orange County FC were to win, they would then travel to play Orange County SC. And maybe it's just because of the nomenclature, but I just think that's a pretty funny, intriguing matchup. I would not want to be calling that game from the booth.
No, somebody's going to screw that up, and I would be one of the people that would be screwing that up. A little interesting fact about Orange County SC, Wichita homegrown player Braden Cloutier is the head coach for Orange County SC. So the first MLS player to ever come out of Wichita is the head coach there for Orange County. That's awesome. It's been interesting to watch that go. I got to agree with you on a bunch of these games, Brian. They look exciting. I think Laredo Heat, that's a great matchup with them. If I think they're going to beat Brazos Valley as well. I'm also calling it now. I think they can beat. I think San Antonio's a great draw for Laredo. I think they can beat them. The other exciting game two other exciting games, and I'm going to save the best for the last. The other exciting game is St. Louis, whether or not St. Louis plays Duluth FC in the NPSL or the Des Moines Menace. Des Moines Menace have been around since the 90s. They're a USL League Two club or former PDO club that really, with their following, how long they've been around, they could be a pro club. I'm super surprised that they're not, but they'll be facing one of those two teams will be facing St. Louis FC. And so St. Louis FC's had a decent year last year. They've got a great supporters group, the St. Louligans. And so I think that's going to be a great matchup. I think Duluth is a better matchup for St. Louis. I think Des Moines is going to be a handful for them. But the game I'm most excited for is after Little Rock beats the shit out of the North Texas Rayados, because we know that's going to happen, Ryan, right? I don't know if I have to come over there and cheer for Little Rock myself, but they'll be traveling down to OKC Energy. And again, I think this is a great matchup for Little Rock. Little Rock's going to win this game. They're going to beat North Texas Rayados because the only people that like North Texas are communists and terrorists. That's it. Those are the only two groups of people in America that like North Texas Rayados after they screwed over FC Wichita last year in the U.S. Open Cup. And then,
I was going to say, and burglars.
And stole our monies. They're thieves and robbers, and I don't have anything nice to say about them. Fuck them. So I think OKC Energy is a great matchup for Little Rock. Bottom of the table last year in the USL, and I didn't see them making a lot of great changes. I think Little Rock can beat them. I'm picking Little Rock over OKC Energy. I think it'll be a great game. And all my friends from the Red Watch, my hope is that as you guys can figure out a way to sling yourselves on over to Wichita and pick me up and take me down there, or I'll meet you guys down there. It's only a 2.5 hour drive. I don't mind.
You know, we've heard from some Tulsa supporters asking if we're going to pick them up on the bus on the way to OKC. So we're going to turn it into an entire just NPSL Heartland hate fest on the OKC Energy.
I'm good with that. We beat the 23s last year in the U.S. Open Cup, so I'm just not impressed with the organization.
You know, that's just as an aside here, it's kind of surprising because OKC came right out of the gate this season with 2 wins, and maybe too many social media posts bragging after 2 weeks about being top of the table was their undoing. I feel good about it. Just from what there's not a whole lot to see from the Rangers right now. 2 tune-up friendlies, exhibition matches against teams from the Lone Star Conference, and then Bugeaters FC out of the Gulf Coast Premier League. But everyone's taking it seriously. There's a lot of history being made, being the first team from Arkansas to ever be in the U.S. Open Cup. So I mean, everyone, but again, it's a first time. So do you rise to the moment? Is the moment too much? But we'll definitely have a few things, a few callbacks, a few nods to our friends at the Air Capital Firm and FC Wichita. Be watching on ESPN Plus because we'll make sure we're put in front of the cameras when we have a few little special things for North Texas Rayados.
I heard we're going to
fiasco.
We're gonna send you some security stuff to keep all your IDs and
full security detail would be appreciated. Yes.
We're gonna do that. Protect your passport. Keep those things close by.
Hey, one more matchup in the second round. I wanted to point out that if the Erie Commodores are to defeat the Dayton Dutch Lions, then they will get to host Pittsburgh Riverhounds. So there would be another really Western Pennsylvania derby right there. That would have some interesting storylines. And then I did notice that if FC Motown defeats the New York Red Bulls, they will host Memphis 901. So you would have a USL championship team having to travel from Memphis, Tennessee to New Jersey to take on FC Motown, which sets up well for another upset there of an amateur team of a pro team.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of went over all the major ones. The only one I would add is Miami FC has a potential second-round matchup with Charlotte Independence, a struggling USL championship side. And Miami FC, as we all know, were in the NASL, and they had a bigger budget than most MLS teams. And I think they could take on most MLS teams, And now they're in NPSL, and they still have a stupid big budget and big ambitions, and a very talented roster with a lot of international experience, a lot of professional experience. I think they go and they put up 10 goals on the Florida Soccer Soldiers, and then they go up to Charlotte, North Carolina, and they send home a USL championship side. I think Miami FC make a very deep run this year in the U.S. Open Cup. If you're not familiar with what an over-under is, it's kind of a betting thing where you have a number and you either pick, hey, I think whatever the prop bet is, it's going to be over this number or it's going to be under this number. It's pretty simple. And we put it on Twitter, put some U.S. Open Cup over-unders out. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to say, what was voted on by our listeners on Twitter, and then you guys can go around, Ryan, Johhny, and come back to me, and we'll answer the over-unders. So the first question is, how many matches will go into penalty kicks in the first round of the U.S. Open Cup? The number is set to 1. So far, 75% of votes have picked over. They think more than one match is going to go to penalty kicks, and then 25% picked the under. Ryan, what was your pick there?
I'm going to take the over. I say 3 matches in the opening round will go to penalty kicks.
Johhny, how about yourself?
You can't just pick that number. That's not the way this gambling works, Riley. I can't just say 1 because that would be my choice, would be 1. I think at least one game is going to go. But I think at least one's going to go, and I can't pick one, so I have to go over. I'm going to go over as well.
Yeah, when I was doing these numbers, I was going through, I wanted even betting on each side. So I was kind of playing the system there. And then I went back through and I was like, what am I going to pick? And I realized I kind of made it difficult, and it's a 50-50 toss-up for myself. So I think it's going to be over, and here's why. I think there's a lot of USL League 2 NPSL matchups. I think those are going to be very tightly contested. And for that reason, I think there are going to be a lot of matches that are going to extra time. And when you get into extra time, when you have these games where you have a lot of these teams are playing Saturday, they're playing Wednesday, and they got to rest their players for playing next Saturday. And they have a very compact schedule. They haven't got a training time. So their fitness isn't all the way there. And a lot of times when we get to extra time, it's tired. There's not a lot of skill left, not a lot of form left. And at the end of these games, you're pushing towards penalty kicks. So I think that we're going to see a lot of penalty kick games in this first round with 6 NPSL USL League 2 matchups. Moving on to the next question, we have how many NPSL teams will beat USL League 2 teams, formerly the PDL, in round 1 of the US Open Cup? And no, we are not showing any bias towards the NPSL here. It's just for this number to make sense, you kind of got to pick a league to beat the other league. So we have 6 matchups. The number is the NPSL is going to take 3 wins out of the 6 matchups. So it's kind of a half and half, and it forces you to say which league is done better. I'm going to go ahead and I'll take the over. I think this year's NPSL teams are very strong, and I'm confident in their abilities to win games this year. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's actually 7. There's actually 7 NPSL versus League 2 matchups. Going through that, of course, you can't pick the number. I think 3 is actually a really good number here.
It is.
Going through the matchups here. Red Bull U23s versus FC Motown. Kind of going back through the last year's results and who they have returning, I think FC Motown of the NPSL will win that match away. Then you have Erie Commodores of the NPSL playing Dayton Dutch Lions of League 2. That one's a toss-up for me. I kind of lean towards Dayton Dutch Lions just because they're hosting. But, I mean, Erie Commodores are more than capable. They had a pretty strong team last year. Reading versus Philadelphia Lone Star. Man, my heart so badly wants to pick Philly Lone Star here, but I mean, Reading's been in the Open Cup numerous years in a row. They're a pretty disciplined side. They've played some darlings in, what are their names? Christos FC before and come out victorious. And I just see Reading holding fast there. Cosmos B versus BlackRock FC. Cosmos B, NPSL, I picked them to win. Laredo, like we've talked about, I think they're going to just mop the floor with Brazos Valley. Laredo is just a very hard place to play. They're a very strong side. They finished number 1 overall in the regular season in the NPSL last season. They're returning a lot of great guys, and they've really stacked their team this year and found a lot of guys that were somehow willing to go spend the summer in Laredo. I do see them coming out of that. You have Des Moines Menace versus Duluth. You know, if Duluth was hosting this, I might pick Duluth to win. But Des Moines, again, another storied program in the lower leagues, has a lot of experience in the Open Cup. They've actually added a striker they announced this morning, Nicholas Brodacki of University of Central Arkansas. He's from Sweden. Last year he played for Seattle Sounders U23 team. The year before he played for the Little Rock Rangers. 2 seasons ago he led the NCAA in goals scored. So they're finding new players to complement their existing lineup, and they're going to be a very deep team. Duluth traveling to Des Moines, I can't really see them pulling that out as much as I'd love to. And then the 7th one is Orange County FC of the MPSL playing FC Golden State Force. And again, Golden State Force just being a strong side. I see 3 for sure wins in the MPSL, and maybe 2 of those that I would think that might lean League 2 are probably toss-ups. So if I had to pick an over or under, I'd probably pick the over. And if I had to pick a number other than 3, it would be 4.
And before you go real quick, I just want to point out, we haven't mentioned this in the podcast yet, but Philly Lone Star dropped some absolutely fire kits about a week
Yes,
ago.
they did.
And they went all the way through where their NPSL team has probably the best kits, and then for each team below them, the U23s, the U17s, they all have slightly different kits and different sponsors. So it's kind of a cool organizational thing, but oh my word, are those kits fire.
And continue with that aside, I did post after we kind of went through on the podcast about our 3 favorite and 3 least favorite crests in the lower league. I did want to make a note that there were 2 or 3 teams that I included in some follow-up tweets that have upgraded their logos or had updated their logos, and I thought were some serious upgrades. And one of those is Lone Star. Their new crest, man, it still has all the homage to Liberia, where the founders of the club and a lot of the players that live in the area where the Philly Lone Star is and contribute to their academy and U23 and first team ranks. A lot of Liberian immigrants there. Their new crest still calls back to that, still pays homage to that, but also it pays homage to the fact that they're in Philadelphia. So there's some iconography there of like the Liberty Bell is included in the crest. So they're from Philly, and that they have a founding in the Liberian community there. And I just think that's awesome that they were able to marry both of those into a really clean crest with red, white, and blue, which can be a bit overplayed, and they still managed to do something very fresh with that.
All right, Johhny, are you taking the over or the under here?
I'm taking the over, baby. I'm with Ryan on that. I think 3 is a great number to pick, just because some of the USL League 2 teams are solid. I think Des Moines is a solid team. 3 would be the number that I would pick if I was gambling, but you won't let us pick that, so I'm gonna have to pick over. I think the NPSL clubs are solid, like Ryan said. I mean, there's some super solid teams. I think Laredo goes deep, and I mean that's one of the teams, and it's so I'm going over, man.
And we have another number 3 on the betting line with number of amateur teams that beat professional teams throughout the U.S. Open Cup, not just the first round. And right now we have 57% picking the over and 43% picking the under. I think Miami FC is they're slotted in to beat Charlotte, so I think that's 1 win you have for amateur teams. Motown are in a solid position as the host. They could get a struggling Memphis squad. Little Rock and Laredo are teams on the cusp, I think, of getting a win there. I think Des Moines could get one. I'm going to take the over here. I think 3 is a very solid number, and I'm going to be a little bit optimistic here. I'm kind of cheering for the upsets a little bit. I think Miami's a lock. Laredo's and Motown are pretty close. Little Rock possibly. I think we might see 4.
I agree 100%. I'm definitely the over on this one. Especially considering all the teams that you mentioned. Plus, there's going to be a surprise in there as well. That's going to give us our 4th or 5th team.
Yeah, Ryan, are you with us there in the over?
I am. Sorry, I was busy trying to multitask with some supporters group banter. Yeah, I would definitely take the over. I think there's some really deep teams that I think are going to surprise a lot of people by the quality that exists in some of these independent lower league teams, especially when you're going up against some of these quote unquote, and I'm doing air quotes with my fingers right now, professional teams. We've had some players come back from trialing with some USL League 1 teams that were offered contracts and didn't really like the towns. Not going to name drop, but didn't like the towns that these League One teams were in. So they asked to come back and play for Little Rock. They said that they thought the quality of a lot of the teams that we played in the Heartland Conference alone were actually better than what they were playing in friendlies in League One. That being said, I just think there's a lot of quality that goes overlooked and that people dismiss teams because they see amateur, and that can go for League Two as well as the NPSL, and that can also go for Open League qualifying teams. I actually think we'll probably see in the second round an Open League qualifying team, at least one, go through to the second round and knock off a USL team, whether that's championship level or League One.
Yeah, and you kind of bridge the gap there to our next question. Number of open qualification teams make it to the second round. The number's at 2. I think Virginia United can get a win against the Kickers. Virginia United knocked off Christos FC, the storied team that made a run against DC United a few years back. They knocked off them to make their way into the Open Cup. I think they get a win against the Kickers. The Kickers have had a very, very poor year in USL League One. They're probably the weakest team. Orlando is probably fighting for that spot as well, and then Ford Madison on top of them. So you have those 3 teams kind of the bottom of USL League One, and I think Virginia United is kind of a scary team. I think that's one. Looking through, I can't find another that I'm certain on, and I haven't really picked the under yet. So I think this is a 1 or a 2. I don't think we would see 3. So I'm going to go a definite under here.
I'm with you on that one. Definitely an under. I think 1 is the max. I would actually probably pick 0 this season. But I think I'm definitely taking the under.
Ryan, are you going to make it a clean sweep on the unders as well?
I am.
So far.
I am. It's almost like we do a podcast and research or something.
And one of our last ones this is one of our most popular questions to vote on. Number of MLS teams knocked out by a team at any other level. So USL League One, USL Championship, NPSL, USL League Two, Open Qualification, anything here knocked off. And we kind of have a half number here. The number is set at 2.5. And I'm looking at it years past. I think the USL Championship has some strong sides this year. I think St. Louis looks scary. St. Louis looks very, very good. There's some other teams that really stand out, and if they're playing on the top of their game, they could really step up and make a run here. I think Miami FC could be another MLS team. They beat Atlanta United a while back, and I can see the over being taken here between USL Championship and the NPSL/USL League Two. I'm going to go with over.
Well, I'm going to take the under on this one. I'm going to go against the grain here. I think the number is probably 2. I think 2 MLS teams will get knocked out. I don't think 3, looking at the matchups. So I'm taking the under on the MLS teams being knocked out by teams of the other level.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under as well here. I think you're gonna probably see maybe up to 5 matches involving MLS teams and teams below them, whether that's independent lower league or USL affiliated teams that are going to take them to the wire or take them to penalty kicks. But it seems like so often, year after year after year, just looking back even 2 and 3 seasons ago, there's so many games that went down to penalty kicks, and yet time and time again, the MLS team pulls it out. And I think you're going to see that there's going to be a lot of great games, a lot of games that people want to tune into. Not dissimilar to people that want to turn in the last few minutes of an NCAA basketball March Madness game when this, 13 seed has a chance at the 4, and you tune in for the last 2 minutes of the game just to see that 4 seed hit like 12 free throws and win by 16. So I think you're going to see a lot of that, where there's going to be some matchups that are going to come down to the last few minutes of the game or go to penalty kicks, but you'll see most the MLS team pull it out. But I would say the number's 2. And I would say that'd probably be a USL championship team would knock one out. That won't even come as much as a surprise. Like, they could even dominate for the full 90 minutes of the match. And then I think there might be one, whether it's Miami FC or a dark horse candidate, that has enough firepower to hang with and then pull away from an MLS team, depending on who they draw. So I think you could see two MLS teams being upset by a lower division team.
And so far, our listeners have picked 59% have said the over for that question. Our last over-under question, the farthest round an amateur team makes it to, the over-under is 3.5. And which is the fourth round is around MLS teams go to. I think Miami FC makes it to the fourth round.
Oh.
I'm going to take the over there just because of Miami.
Without a doubt. Will, I mean, it's been the trend and the tradition that they make it that far. So I think this is the easiest one you gave us. I think it's definitely the over.
Yeah, I think it's the over as well. That's an interesting number of the over-under being at 3.5. Does that mean that a team makes it to the fourth round but is defeated? So they technically passed the third but didn't quite make the fourth?
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. You got to make it to the fourth. That's the easy pick.
Yeah, so making it to the fourth, yeah, I definitely think, I definitely would say that someone makes it to the fourth round.
And the strange thing here is that the listeners have went against the grain of what we just picked in our sweep of overs, that 53% have said the under, that a team will not make it to the fourth round.
Well, usually the listeners are right. We'll see if they prove us wrong.
All right, welcome in Coach Eric Rudland from AFC Ann Arbor. AFC Ann Arbor is making an Open Cup run. Their first match is pitted themselves up against USL League One side Lansing Ignite on May 8th. They're traveling to Lansing for an Inter-Michigan battle. But first of all, Coach, you've been coaching AFC Ann Arbor since 2015, along with being the sporting director of the club. And since your first season, you've made the playoffs with AFC Ann Arbor and the NPSL. And then 2017 and 2018, you won the Great Lakes Conference and made it all the way to the NPSL Midwest Regional Finals. So coming in your first 3 years, automatically having success with the club and bringing him to one of the toughest conferences in the NPSL and having success year in and year out. What has that been like in your tenure?
Every year obviously presents different challenges, and, in our league, it's transient rosters that we're dealing with from season to season. But I think a lot of credit to our community and to our ownership group, for really putting together a solid framework, and stability from year to year, in the league, whereas we've been able to attract some good players, we've been able to put together a good football environment. And, at the end of the day, when you have those things clicking on all cylinders, you can put together some results. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a fun project to be a part of. When I came into the club in 2015, it was only the club's second year, in existence. So, it's been a lot of baby steps and, putting the building blocks together. But there's been a lot of great people involved, and it's definitely been fun to be a part of.
In the NPSL openers on May 4th this year, as you travel to the Michigan Stars, and then right after that on May the 8th, you have a 7 o'clock game in Lansing against a professional side in Lansing Ignite. And of course, you have experience coaching in Lansing. You coached with Lansing United when they were in the NPSL. You had success there before they moved to USL League Two. So what is it like for you returning to a community in an area that you're familiar with and playing their new professional side in the first round of the U.S. Open Cup?
Obviously there's still some same people involved, with the club now in Lansing as there were, during my time frame a few years back. So, there's some familiarity. It's not a quote unquote local rivalry in terms of us playing against one another, with the same sides or same organizations, because, technically it's a new organization, new ownership group, new venue, new stadium, et cetera, that they have in Lansing. But there's definitely, familiarity with, playing style and we know a lot of the players that they've brought in to put on their roster and whatnot. So, it should be a fun match. We're really looking forward to it. This will be our third year in the Open We've been, obviously, with them kicking off their season earlier than we have, it gives us a jump start on, watching matches, putting together some ideas and some details in terms of how they play and their personnel and whatnot. Obviously, there's a disadvantage when it comes to preparation on the field for us because we're still waiting for most of our players to arrive into preseason. But, at the end of the day, we want to put on a good show. We want to play on the front foot and, hopefully put a competitive side together for the game.
What does the Open Cup mean for a club like AFC Ann Arbor competing in NPSL, getting opportunity to play against some top quality clubs and players? And what are your goals and expectations going into this year's Open Cup run?
It's important for us. I mean, first and foremost, obviously, for clubs at our level that, are in USL League 2 or the NPSL, it's not like every team in our league gets the invitation to be a part of the tournament. So, I always tell our guys coming in that being a part of the tournament, we have to remember how we got here, and we got here because we had a good season in 2018. So, the credit is really due to the players that were with us last year and the guys who put together a good run in the league. Because if it weren't for that, we wouldn't have the opportunity to participate in the U.S. Open Cup. So there's some exclusivity there, that I think we identify with and we recognize and we definitely appreciate. We don't take it for granted, that's for certain. Now, when it comes to getting results and pressing forward into the tournament, we all understand the variables involved and the fact that, we're not necessarily set up for success at our level coming into the event, just in terms of preparation time and, the types of players that we have on our roster versus maybe, other clubs that are full-time paid professional guys. So that being said, we want to put a competitive side together. We're trying to get our preseason going a little bit earlier in anticipation of the Open Cup match. Working on, different options in terms of our roster, as a lot of our college players won't be in and available at that point. So, we're putting a lot of energy into the game, knowing that, we might be up against it a bit, which is just par for the course and something that obviously we fully understand.
And with a congested schedule, especially at the beginning of the season, you already have a very compact NPSL schedule. On top of that, you're playing Wednesday games in the U.S. Open Cup out of the gate. How can AFC Ann Arbor build off the success last year in the NPSL and continue to do that while playing such a congested schedule in the Open Cup?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, early on, it's about, trying to make sure we're keeping players healthy, and then when you come up with midweek games and weekend matches, I think there's a stretch in our schedule where we play 3 games in 7 days or something. We have to have a player rotation, and we have to have a deep enough talent pool that we can draw from, to keep guys healthy as well as keep the side competitive. So we've tried to keep that in mind, obviously, as we build the team, and we're pretty upfront when we communicate with players that there is going to be rotation, just because we want to keep players healthy. We want to make sure that by the end of the season, we can get to our top team come playoffs, and part of that is early on, putting pieces together and making sure that everybody's on the same page from that standpoint. So there's not an easy way to do it. We wish obviously we had our 22 guys or whatever it is, and we're locked and loaded. But at our level, that's just not how rosters are put together and how teams are formed. So, the other piece I would say is, a big thing for us this year was obviously trying to retain and recruit returning players, because, it's easy for them to come back into the club and hit the ground running. They already understand our system of play, our style of play, how we go about our business and training. So we've been fortunate that we've been able to get some of, a large pool of returning players back that will hopefully help us early on in the season.
And obviously, the Mighty Oak have a very strong support. They have some great supporters and great fans, and Lansing Ignite, a professional club with a great fan base and great attendance so far in their tenure. But What kind of atmosphere can be expected for this Open Cup match?
Not sure, to be honest with you. I think there'll be some local fans that are intrigued by the matchup. There's some local players on our side, obviously, that I think resonate through the community. It's close enough for our fan base here in Ann Arbor to get across to Lansing to get to the match. So, we're hopeful that we have some traveling supporters. Talked to a few people who were at Lansing's home opener this past weekend, and I watched the game online. It looks like obviously they're pushing hard to, grow their fan base and get people out to matches. So, midweek matchup, hopefully will be a good draw. And obviously we're hopeful that we can bring some fans along with us, that can be there to pull for us throughout the 90 minutes, or 120 or PKs or whatever the game goes to. But I would say, the field conditions I think are a little bit concerning at this point. In Lansing, the matches that we've watched and talking to people who are at the game, I think that, anytime you play in a baseball stadium, the orientation of the field is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit different, obviously, than playing in a traditional football stadium. And I think that from what we've seen, and we haven't talked to Lansing about this, is, they've had some issues with their turf that they laid over the infield baseball diamond. You could pretty clearly see it in the game that it was, pulling up and flipping over, and people were running out of the field fixing it during the match and whatnot. So I don't know if that issue will be resolved, by the time we head up there, because I believe they have a couple home matches prior to then. But we'll have to kind of deal with the conditions from a playing standpoint, and be prepared for that.
And a question kind of going in a different direction. In our latest podcast and podcasts throughout the season, we've talked about how a different direction NPSL teams are going in, where they're hiring NAIA coaches and former NAIA coaches, so they bring a different player base into the NPSL and also have that different coaching experience. And you yourself have coached with NAIA team Spring Arbor University. What do you think the NAIA brings as a player base and from a coaching standpoint that's a little bit different to the NPSL? And why has that been a successful format for NPSL teams across the country?
Well, when you look at traditionally speaking, competitive NAIA programs, there's a large pool of international players that comprise those rosters. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing. When you look at the NPSL, obviously, in our league, we don't have a limited number of international roster spots on our rosters, whereas comparatively speaking to USL League 2, I believe they're allowed 7 international players on their roster, 8 or whatever the number is. So it makes it easier for NPSL clubs to attract, international players who are very good at the NAIA level to compete on their rosters. Now, the second piece of it is, and coaches who coach in college at an NCAA program, Division III, Division II, Division I, in the off season, they're only allowed to work with a maximum of 5 of their players. Or sorry, they can only have 5 of their players on a roster, on a team, as well as they're not allowed to coach any of their players in the off season. Whereas the NAIA does not have that restriction. You could have, more than 5 players on a roster, and if a coach theoretically wanted to, they could coach some of their guys in the summertime. So I think it makes it a bit easier for that transition, as well as the foreign roster spots. And a lot of it just comes down to the rules and regulations between, the NPSL and the college system, whether it be NAIA or NCAA.
Well, Coach, thank you for your time, and thank you for insight, and good luck in your upcoming season and your Open Cup match at Lansing.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and we look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Of course. Thank you once again.
Yep. Bye.
And moving on to a Heartland topic, we're going to talk about Tulsa, as Tulsa Athletic have made an announcement that they will start a youth academy. And Ryan and Johhny, you guys are plugged in the Heartland Conference. What does this mean for Tulsa, and how are they growing the game in Tulsa and their community?
Ryan, you want me to go?
Go ahead.
Well, I think they made more than one announcement, Riley. They made several announcements. First of all, they announced that they were starting a UPSL U20 club. which I think is a great thing because we're creating a pathway to the senior team in the NPSL. They have announced that they're going to have an academy, which is, in essence, a youth program for youth in the area. And then finally, they also said they're going to create the Tulsa Athletic Soccer Foundation, which is without digging too deep into it, I didn't hear go to the press announcement, obviously, which sounds to me like it's going to be a way for businesses or individuals to make financial contributions to youth soccer in the area, in combat of this pay to play situation that's going on. I think it's great. I think it's great for the youth in Tulsa. I think it's great for Tulsa's organization itself, and I think it's great for soccer, the NPSL brand. I mean, you're going to grow the game in Tulsa. Tulsa is a great soccer town. When soccer got started in America, in the NASL back in the 70s, there was a team in Tulsa. My dad used to take me to those games. Tulsa's a great soccer town. And so I think any time you invest into the youth in your community, it's a positive thing. Not only do you grow, but do you grow love for your game because you're creating youth teams. I'm guessing they're going to have a Tulsa Athletic youth program where, much like FC Wichita has FC Wichita youth players, but you create a fan base like that. In addition, you get community support you get community support for your club because you're growing the youth game and you're giving back to the youth game. Overall, I love all the things that they announced, not just the Tulsa Academy, but the opportunities for the U20s. It's in essence a B team. I mean, I think it's great for Tulsa Athletic. I think it's great for their community, and I commend them for doing it. I think it's great.
Yeah, after looking over and watching their announcement, I think it's kind of a pattern that everyone will need to follow, whether it's the NPSL or regional leagues, to one degree or another. It's, having a place for your younger players and your U23s that may not make the first team or may not quite be ready for the first team to make that step up, that you're still giving them a place to train, you're still giving them time to gain experience and to build up the ability to come onto your first team. So you're creating a chain of sustainability for your program, and then you're offering the youth academy, which a lot of teams have started, but they don't really have that bridge quite yet at that U23 level. So now you have a youth academy. So you're showing the community that you are in that you're not just a team that you stuck in their community and you expect them to show up for. You're now showing that you're investing back in, that you're committed to the long term, that you're wanting to provide a program option for children, young men, teenagers coming up. And then with the foundation, you're allowing, and that's obviously in Tulsa we know there's a USL team there, and I know a lot of the people that are in the ownership group there now that are very good people, but there's just a perception from the outside when you look at towns like that we've dropped a franchise in your town, so now you can come out to us. And a lot of times your sponsors locally are going to be people with greater dollar amounts and donations that they can give as sponsorships versus starting a foundation, which allows any small business to play a part and feel that they're playing an active part in investing in the club, at the youth, at the U23, at the first team level. And so, you're creating that kind of two-way investment. You have a club investing in the city and a city investing in the club.
It's a huge win for Tulsa. Ryan's right. It's massive. Again, anytime you invest in youth soccer, an organization invests in youth soccer, you're going to draw a lot of attention, and you're going to draw a lot of positive attention for that. That foundation is going to provide opportunities for kids who can't afford to pay club soccer somewhere. It's going to provide those kids who, some of them have a lot of talent and whose parents can't afford for them to play club soccer in Tulsa for one of the major Tulsa clubs there. They're going to put that foundation is going to provide them with an opportunity to play soccer, at the highest level in Tulsa. I think it's awesome. I mean, again, like Ryan said, every club should be doing that. The other thing I'd like to mention is that my hope is that their academy provides opportunities like what FC Wichita is doing this year. We're sending 10 of our academy. We have a red versus blue game on May 1st. We're sending 10 of our academy players, anywhere from 14 to 17-year-old players. 10 of them are getting the opportunity to go up and play in this red versus blue matchup against the first team, against our NPSL first team. And 5 of those players, based on their performance and training leading up to this match, are going to get to train with the first team all summer. And what an opportunity. And my hope is that Tulsa and other clubs will provide youth players with that opportunity, because what a way to start a fire in a youth player than to let him train with a first team like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Crazy unique.
Speaking of the academy, and Tulsa having an academy, and FC Wichita's academy, and Little Rock Rangers have an academy, and I believe Demise in the Heartland Conference also has an academy. So I know they'll all probably play, obviously, tournaments, but they'll also play in their local leagues. But how cool would it be to see maybe a youth version of the Heartland Conference kind of spring up, where there would kind of be, in addition to their local league schedule, a lot of these youth teams from their under the clubs of the Heartland Conference actually get to play each other as well. Kind of similar to what you see highlights and even live matches from time to time between the FC Barcelona and Real Madrid academies, where you see like the 12-year-olds, and they take it just as seriously because they know there's history there all the way up to the first team.
It'd be great. And I just want to say, if we decide to do something like that, we got to make sure we get the supporters out for these kids.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We sent supporters out to where we had a U20 team last year, and we sent supporters out, and the kids came over after the game, and they're 16 to 18-year-old kids, and they're like, we've never had anybody cheer for us like that. And so
that's awesome.
What a way to introduce them to what supporters can do to the game. I'm a huge supporter fan. I'm a huge fan of what supporters bring to the match. And you want to grow players into loving supporters, start giving them support like that at a young age, and they'll love you for the rest of their playing careers. That's for sure.
Yeah, that'd be such a fun idea to watch grow in the Heartland Conference. And our last scheduled topic of the night, we're going to talk about the Oakland Roots, kind of a very trendy, brandy, new NPSL Founders Cup team that's springing up in Oakland, California, as a lot of teams are moving away from Oakland. And they have a unique partnership with an apparel company that's super big in Oakland, the West Coast, very trendy, and that is Oaklandish. Very side note real quick, their logo is similar to the Oakland Roots, and that's cool, but Oaklandish's logo looks like a direct copy of the Timberland logo, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Big brand, they're big into boots, and they're into other apparel and outdoor wear and stuff, but it looks like a direct copy. Side note, but Oaklandish really brings a unique format to Oakland Roots. They host all of their apparel sales. They probably, because of Oaklandish, they have the highest in quality of merchandise in all the lower leagues. They have New Era 51 hats, which is the best quality hats you can get. They have very high quality gear, very nice looking gear. It's designed well. It really sells across the country too. Just people are recognizing it, and they're recognizing it to an extent where Damian Lillard, which also known as D-Lil, he was warming up for a NBA playoff game. He's actually from Oakland, and he was wearing an Oakland Roots shirt, which caused a huge rave on Twitter. People going bananas about it. But it just goes to show that the merchandise game can be taken at all different angles, and how seriously you take it is how seriously people will take you, and how merchandise is so important in looking professional as a lower division club. So I like the partnership with Oaklandish. I think it's very, very cool, and I'm excited to watch it grow.
Well, there have been a lot of clubs whose social media game and their merch game has really grown their club. I mean, Minneapolis City, for one, the Bugeaters. We're playing teams all over the country right now. social media game is strong, their merch game is strong, and it's kind of a simple logo, but it's interesting. So those are just examples of, what you do on social media and what you do with your merchandise can really bring a lot of attention to your club.
Yeah, for sure. The branding aspect in there in social media and how kind of the game has changed as the NPSL has evolved over the past few years of social media is very interesting to watch, and how we're all becoming a little bit more connected, and the knowledge sharing is so much easier now with social media, easier to keep up with, obviously. So it's really cool to see. And we're about at the 1 hour mark, guys. It's been a very, very fun episode. We had 2 absolutely amazing interviews and kind of discussion all across the board. A lot of teams that we don't talk about usually, and just some very, very cool storylines this week that have popped up. Looking forward to next week's episode.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.